There are some nights in life that feel heavier than others. Not because something dramatic happens, but because everything becomes quiet enough for you to hear your own thoughts more clearly than usual. On one such evening, somewhere far away from busy highways and bright city lights, a lawn G road stretched through a quiet countryside. The sky was turning soft shades of orange and deep blue, as the sun slowly disappeared behind distant hills. Birds were returning home. The wind was gentle, and the world, as if tired too, was beginning to slow down. Along this road walked a stranger. No one knew his name. No one knew where he had come from. Only his footsteps echoed softly against the empty path. He carried a small bag over his shoulder, nothing heavy, nothing unusual. But his eyes looked like someone who had been traveling for a very long time. Not tea across places, but across thoughts, memories, and moments that never fully settled in the heart. As the last light of the sun faded, he stopped walking for a moment. He looked around slowly. In front of him, far in the distance, he noticed something unusual. A small cluster of lights. Not bright like a city. Not loud like a town. Just gentle, soft, almost like someone had placed tiny pieces of sunlight on the ground and left them there to glow through the evening. The stranger stood still. For a moment, he didn't move. The wind passed by him quietly, brushing G against his clothes, as if telling him something without words. He didn't know why, but something inside him felt calm and yet uncertain, because places like this did not usually exist on his journey. He had seen crowded towns, empty deserts, cold stations where trains never stayed long enough. But this was different. As the sky grew darker, the lights in the distance became clearer. A small village, hidden between trees and soft hills. No tall buildings, no loud sounds, just a peaceful arrangement of wooden houses, warm windows, and slow-moving shadows. The strange R took a step forward, then another, and as he walked closer, he noticed something even more unusual. There was no noise of hurry, no shouting, no rushing footsteps, only calm movement. People were walking slowly, talking softly, smiling without urgency. It felt like time itself had decided to breathe differently here. He didn't know why, but his tiredness suddenly felt heavier. Not painful, just noticeable, as if his body finally realized how long he had been holding everything inside. When he reached the edge of the village, he stopped again. A wooden sign stood near a small path. It was slightly worn, but still clear. The words were simple: "Welcome. You may rest here as long as you need." The stranger read it once. Then again. Something about it felt unfamiliar. Because in his experience, places did not usually welcome people without asking questions. But this place did not ask anything. It only offered rest. A soft silence surrounded him. And for the first time in a long while, he felt like he could exhale properly, slowly, completely. He adjusted the strap of his bag and took one more step forward into the village. And as he did, the warm glow of the evening lights gently wrapped around him, like the beginning of something he did not yet understand. Something calm, something quiet, something that felt like it had been waiting for him, without even knowing his name. The village welcomed him without sound. Not in a dramatic way. Not with music or celebration, but in the quietest possible way a place can welcome someone, by simply existing peacefully. The stranger walked slowly along the narrow path that led deeper into the village. Each step felt soft, than the last, as if the ground itself had learned how to be gentle. On both sides of the path, small wooden houses stood close together. Every window glowed with warm yellow light, not bright enough to overwhelm the night, just enough to make the darkness feel less lonely. Some doors were open, not out of carelessness, but out of trust. People sat on porches, speaking in low voices. A few were drinking tea. Others were simply watching the evening settle in. No one stared at him. No one questioned him. They only noticed him the way you notice a passing breeze. You feel it, but you don't try to hold it. The stranger slowed his pace. Something inside him felt unfamiliar again. Not fear, not comfort, but a strange mixture of both, because he had never been in a place where he did not have to explain himself. He kept walking, until he saw something that made him pause. At the corner of a small bend in the path stood an old man. He was sitting on a wooden bench outside a small garden. The garden was simple, not large, not perfectly arranged, but full of life. Flowers in soft colors, white, pale yellow, light purple, bloomed quietly under a fading sky. A few lanterns hung from short wooden poles, glowing gently like floating fireflies that had decided to stay still. The old man was watering the plants, very slowly, very carefully, as if each drop of water mattered more than anything else in the world. The stranger stopped at a respectful distance. He didn't want to interrupt, but something about the scene held him there. The old man noticed him after a moment. He didn't react with surprise. He didn't ask who he was. He simply looked up, nodded once, and said softly, "Long journey?" The stranger hesitated. The N nodded. "Yes," he replied. The old man smiled faintly, as if he already understood everything that needed to be understood. Most people who arrive here have walked too far without resting, he said gently. The stranger didn't know how to respond, so he stayed silent, and somehow, that silence felt comfortable. The old man continued watering the plants. After a few moments, he spoke again. "This garden," he said, "does not grow because it is rushed. It grows because it is patient." The stranger looked at the flowers. They didn't look perfect, but they looked alive in a way that felt peaceful. The old man placed the watering can down, then slowly gestured toward an empty spot on the bench. "You can sit if you like. The evening gets softer when shared." The stranger hesitated for only a moment. Then he sat down. The wooden bench was warm from the day's fading sunlight. A soft breeze moved through the garden. Somewhere far away, a bird called once, then became silent again. The old man leaned back slightly, watching the sky change color. "You know," he said, "this village is not special because of what it has." He paused. "It is special because of what it does not have." The stranger looked at him. The old man continued. "No rush, no competition, no need to prove anything." A quiet moment passed. The sky above deepened into a soft navy blue. The first stars began to appear, one by one, like someone slowly turning on gentle lights in a sleep-in world. The stranger felt something strange in his chest. Not sadness, not happiness, something softer, something like relief, as if part of him had been holding its breath for a very long time, and only now remembered how to let go. He looked at the garden again. The flowers swayed slightly in the evening wind. The lantern light flickered gently, and everything felt still. The old man stood up slowly. "I think," he said, "you should rest. Soon, the village becomes quieter after full night arrives." He picked up his watering can. Then, before walking away, he added, "If you stay here long enough, you might forget what it feels like to hurry." He smiled once more, and walked back into the garden, leaving the stranger alone on the bench, but not lonely. For the first time in a long while, the silence around him did not feel empty. It felt safe. The night had now fully arrived, not in a heavy way, but in a soft, gradual surrender of light. The village lanterns became more visible as the sky deepened into a calm, endless blue. Stars scattered above like quiet thoughts drifting across the mind, slow, steady, unhurried. The stranger stood up from the wooden bench. For a moment, he didn't know where to go. The old man had already disappeared into the garden, leaving behind only the faint sound of leaves moving gently in the wind. The stranger adjusted his bag again, then began walking deeper into the village. This time, slower, not because he was tired of the path, but because the village itself seemed to ask him to slow down. As he moved forward, he noticed something different. The sounds here were not silence, but something softer than silence. The gentle creak of wooden signs swinging slightly in the breeze. The distant sound of a kettle boiling somewhere inside a home. A faint laughter that rose and disappeared like a passing breath. Everything existed, but nothing demanded attention. He walked past a few houses. In one, a family was sitting together around a small table. No television, no phones, just warm light, shared food, and quiet conversation. In another, a woman was reading a book near a window, her face calm, as if time had paused just for her. The stranger felt something unfamiliar again. Not discomfort this time, but curiosity. A question forming quietly inside him. Why does everything here feel like it belongs exactly where it is? He kept walking until the path gently curved toward a small open area. And there, he saw it. A small bakery. Not large, not modern, just a simple wooden structure with a glowing sign above the door. Warm bread, open until night becomes quiet. Soft golden light spilled from inside. It looked inviting in a way that did not speak loudly. It simply waited. The stranger hesitated outside for a moment, then slowly pushed the door open. A gentle bell sound rang, not sharp, not sudden, but soft, like a whisper announcing presence. Inside, the air was warm, comforting, filled with the smell of freshly baked bread and something sweet, like honey mixed with milk. A man stood behind the counter. He looked older than middle age, with calm eyes and flour lightly dusting his hands. He looked up and smiled, as if he expected the stranger. "You look like someone who has walked a long way," the baker said gently. The stranger nodded slightly. "Yes, I think I have." The baker didn't ask anything else. Instead, he reached behind and placed a small loaf of bread on the counter. "Warm, fresh, steamin'. Slightly. No charge," he said quietly. The stranger looked at him, confused, but also strangely touched. The baker continued, almost as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "In this village, we don't sell comfort to strangers. We share it." The stranger didn't respond immediately. His hands slowly wrapped around the warm bread. The heat traveled into his palms, soft, steady, grounding. He took a small bite. It was simple, but it tasted like something he had forgotten. Not just food, but safety. He sat on a small wooden stool near the window. Outside, the village continued its slow breathing. Lights flickered gently. Shadows moved without hurry. Time felt less like something that pushed forward, and more like something that simply existed. The baker sat down nearby, wiping his hands slowly. After a long silence, he spoke. People who come here usually don't stay long. The stranger looked at him. The baker didn't turn his head. He kept watching the soft night outside. They arrive tired, rest a little, and then leave before they learn how to stay still. A pause. Then softly, but sometimes, someone forgets how to leave. Stranger lowered his gaze to the bread in his hands. For the first time, he noticed how tired he actually was. Not just in his body, but in his thoughts. In the way he always moved forward without knowing why. Outside, the night deepened further. The stars became clearer. The wind slow. Down. Even the village seemed to settle into deeper rest. The baker stood up again. If you want, he said gently, there is a small place near the lake where travelers sometimes sit when they cannot decide where to go next. He placed a cloth over the counter. Just follow the quiet path. Tea will guide you. The stranger finished the last piece of bread slowly, then stood up. He nodded once to the baker and stepped back outside into the night. The bell above the door rang softly behind him, and as he walked away, he realized something strange. The village was not changing him. It was simply allowing him to notice what was already inside him. A need for rest, a need for stillness, a need to stop running without knowing what he was chasing. Ahead, somewhere in the distance, the faint reflection of a lake began to appear under the moonlight. And the path toward it felt quieter than before, almost like it was waiting. The path toward the lake was quieter than the rest of the village. Not because there was nothing there, but because everything there seemed to speak. In whispers, the stranger walked slowly. Each step felt lighter than the last, as if the ground itself was no longer asking him to hurry. The taste of bread still lingered in his memory. Simple, comforting, almost like a reminder that not everything in life needed to be earned through struggle. As he moved forward, the houses slowly disappeared behind him. The lantern lights grew fewer, and the sounds of the village faded into a deeper silence. Not empty silence, but layered silence. The kind that feels like it has depth. Like it contains space for thoughts to rest instead of race. Soon, the trees began to open up. And there it was. The lake. It didn't announce itself. It didn't shine or sparkle dramatically. It's simple. Why existed. Still, wide, calm. The surface of the water reflected the night sky so perfectly that it was difficult to tell where the water ended and the stars began. The moon hung above it, soft and steady, casting a long silver path across the lake's surface. The stranger stopped at the edge. For a moment, he didn't move at all. Even his breathing slowed without effort. There was something about this place that didn't ask questions. It didn't expect answers. It only allowed presence. He stepped closer and sat down on a smooth wooden dock that extended slightly over the water. The wood was cool, not cold, just neutral, as if it had been waiting all day for someone to sit quietly on it. The lake responded gently to his presence. A faint ripple moved across the surface, then settled again. Somewhere far away, an owl called once. And then the fours. Returned to silence. The stranger looked at the reflection of the sky. Stars moved slowly in the water, though the real sky above remained still. It created a strange feeling in his chest, as if he was seeing two worlds at once. And both were calm enough to exist without conflict. He leaned back slightly, supporting himself with his hands behind him. The night air was cool against his skin, soft, comforting. A breeze passed over th. Lake, and the surface shimmered gently, like a breath moving across sleeping water. The stranger closed his eyes for a moment, not to sleep, but just to rest. And in that small moment, something changed. The weight he had been carrying for so long, without even naming it, felt slighter. Why lighter? Not gone, just less heavy, as if the village, the garden, the bakery, and now the lake had slowly been teaching him something without words. That rest is not something you earn. It is something you allow. He opened his eyes again. The moon had moved slightly higher. Time was passing, but it didn't feel urgent anymore. Behind him, somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of a wind chime moved gently. Soft, random, perfectly placed in the silence. The stranger sat there for a long time, not thinking of where he had come from, not thinking of where he would go next, just sitting, just breathing, just being. The lake remained unchanged, patient, constant, as if it had seen countless nights like this one, and understood exactly what to do with them. Slowly, the stranger lowered his gaze, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he needed to move forward. The night had now fully settled into its deepest form, not dark in a frightening way, but dark in a comforting way. The kind of darkness that does not hide things but instead gently holds them in place. The stranger still sat by the lake. Time felt less like something moving forward and more like something quietly resting beside him. The wind had softened even more now. The trees no longer swayed with effort. Even the smallest sounds seemed careful not to disturb the silence. He noticed something strange. The longer he stayed still, the less his thoughts tried to speak loudly. It was as if the lake, the moonlight, and the night itself were slowly teaching his mind how to slow down. Not stop thinking, but to stop rushing. A few moments passed, maybe more. It was difficult to tell. Near the edge of the water, a small wooden boat was gently tied to a post. It moved slightly with the lake's soft rhythm, never leaving its place, just swaying in quiet patience. The stranger looked at it. For some reason, it felt familiar. Not because he had seen it before, but because it represented something he had forgotten. Stability without movement, peace without effort. He stood up slowly and walked toward the boat. Each step felt natural now, as if the village had already adjusted his pace without asking. He placed one hand lightly on the edge of the boat. The wood was smooth, worn by time, but not broken, just lived in. He didn't get inside. He only stood there, observing it, as if understanding something without needing words. Behind him, the loch remained still. Above him, the stars continued their silent journey. And in that moment, he realized something quietly profound. He had spent so much of his life moving from one place to another, that he had never truly arrived anywhere. Not fully, not mentally, not emotionally, physically. The stranger slowly returned to the dock and sat down again. This time, even his thoughts felt reluctant to move. A deep calm had begun, spreading through him, not sudden, but gradual, like water filling an empty space drop by drop. Somewhere in the distance, very faintly, the village lights shimmered through the trees. They felt far away now, not distant in kilometers, but distant in feeling, as if that world belonged to movement, and this place belonged to stillness. The stranger leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. His eyes stayed open, but his awareness began to soften. The lake in front of him no longer felt like an object. It felt like a presence. A companion that did not speak but understood everything anyway. A long silence passed, and in that silence, something inside him finally stopped resisting rest. Not sleep yet, but the permission to approach it. Slowly, naturally, without fear, the night continued around him. But he no longer felt separate from it. He felt included, like he had finally been allowed to stop being someone who is always going somewhere, and just be someone who is here. The stranger remained by the lake until the moon had climbed a little higher into the sky. He wasn't waiting for anything. He wasn't expecting anyone. For the first time in many years, he simply allowed the night to exist exactly as it was. A cool breeze drifted across the water, carrying the gentle scent of pine trees, fresh earth, and distant apple blossoms. He took one slow breath, then another. Each breath felt deeper than the last, as though the air itself carried a quiet kindness. When he finally stood, he noticed a narrow stone path leading away from the lake. It curved gently between tall trees before disappearing into the moonlit landscape. There was no sign, no direction, only the quiet invitation of the path itself. The stranger smiled softly. There was something comforting about not knowing exactly where he was going. For so much of his life, wide journey had required a destination. Every road demanded a purpose. Every decision had to lead somewhere important. But tonight, the journey itself was enough. He began walking. The small stones beneath his boots made almost no sound. Above him, branches swayed lazily against the silver sky. Moonlight slipped between the leaves, creating patches of pale light that rested upon the path like little islands. The forest smelled clean. After the evening breeze, somewhere nearby, water trickled over smooth rocks. Not loudly, just enough to remind the night that it was alive. After several peaceful minutes, the trees slowly began to thin. The stranger stepped into an open field. At first, he thought it was simply another meadow. Then he noticed the rows, perfectly spaced, stretching gently across the hillside. Apple trees, dozens of them, perhaps hundreds. Our branches were heavy with ripe fruit that glowed faintly beneath the moonlight. The orchard seemed asleep. Every tree stood quietly, unmoving except for the occasional whisper of leaves dancing in the breeze. The stranger walked between the rows. The grass beneath his feet felt soft, almost lick. A thick green blanket laid carefully across the earth. Tiny white flowers rested among the blades of grass. They nodded gently whenever the wind passed. Fireflies floated through the orchard. Not many, just enough to paint tiny dots of golden light in the darkness. They drifted lazily around the trees, never rushing, never competing, simply existing. The stranger reached out and gently touched the rough bark of one apple tree. It felt warm despite the cool night. Strong, patient. He wondered how many seasons this tree had witnessed. How many springs had covered it in blossoms. Many autumns had filled its branches with fruit. The tree had never hurried. Yet year after year, it had quietly become exactly what it was meant to be. The thought stayed with him. Maybe people were not so different. Perhaps life was never asking anyone to race. Perhaps it only asked them to keep growing, one quiet season at a time. A wooden bench rested beneath the largest tree in the orchard. Its surface had become smooth after countless years of use. The stranger sat down. Above him, apples hung like tiny lanterns among the leaves. The branches swayed gently, 1 league F slowly drifted downward. It floated through the air without resistance before landing softly beside his shoe. He picked it up. Its edges were beginning to turn golden. Summer was quietly preparing to become autumn. Nature never argued with change. It welcomed each season exactly when T arrived. The stranger wondered what it might feel like to live that way. To stop resisting every ending. To stop fearing every beginning. To trust that each season had its own quiet purpose. The orchard seemed to answer without speaking. The breeze continued. The stars remained above. The H rested below. Everything accepted its place. Nothing wished to become something else. Somewhere deeper within the orchard came the soft sound of footsteps. Slow, gentle. An elderly woman appeared carrying a small woven basket. Inside were several fresh apples. She noticed the strange immediately. Instead of looking surprised, she smiled the way people smile at someone they were always expecting. "Good evening," she said softly. Her voice blended naturally with the peaceful sounds around them. The stranger returned the greeting. "I hope I'm not disturbing anything." The woman chuckled quietly. "My dear," she replied, "peace cannot be disturbed by someone who arrives with a quiet heart." She sat on the opposite end of the bench. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. They simply watched the orchard breathe beneath the moonlight. Finally, she lifted one apple from her basket and offered it to him. He accepted it with both hands. It was cool, smooth, perfectly round. "You don't grow an orchard bee. Why pulling on the branches?" the woman said after a while. "You care for the roots, and time does the rest." The stranger looked down at the apple. Her words settled gently inside him. He realized he had spent years trying to force life forward, trying to solve tomorrow before today had even ended, trying to carry burdens that belonged to another season. The woman looked toward the stars. "When I was young," she whispered, "I believe deep peace was something waiting far away." She smiled, but it was growing quietly around me the whole time. The wind moved gently through the orchard. Once again, hundreds of leaves answered together with the softest whisper. The stranger closed his eyes. Just for a moment, the scent of apples, the cool night air, the rustling leaves, the distant sound of water. Everything blended together into a gentle rhythm. A rhythm that asked for nothing, expected nothing, only invited him to rest a little longer. The windmill that measured quiet moments. The elderly woman remained beside him for a while. Neither of them seemed to feel the need to fill the silence. It was the kind of silence that asked for nothing. A silence that allowed thoughts to drift gently, like clouds crossing a sky. The stranger slowly finished the apple. It was sweeter than he expected. Not because it was extraordinary, but because he had taken the time to taste it. He smiled to himself. How many meals had he eaten while thinking about somewhere else? How many sunsets had he missed because he was already worried about tomorrow? The old woman stood, brushing a few leaves from her long woolen coat. "If you continue along this path," she said softly, "you'll find an old windmill." She looked toward the distant hill. "It hasn't ground grain for many years." The stranger looked at her curiously. "Then why does everyone still visit it?" Her smile grew warmer. "Because sometimes people don't go somewhere to find answers." She paused. "Sometimes they simply go somewhere to remember how to listen." With that, she gave him a gentle nod and disappeared between the rows of apple trees. The stranger watched until she was no longer visible. Then he continued walking. The orchard slowly faded behind him. The path H climbed gently uphill. The air became cooler. The breeze carried the sweet scent of grass mixed with the faint fragrance of wild lavender growing. Beside the trail, the moon illuminated everything with soft silver light. Nothing felt hidden. Nothing felt frightening. Even the shadows seemed peaceful tonight. After several minutes, the hill opened before him. There it stood, an old wooden windmill. Its large blades turned slowly in the gentle night breeze. Not quickly, not loudly, just enough to remind the world that movement didn't have to be rushed. The windmill looked ancient. Its wood had faded with countless summers and winters. Yet every beam remained strong. Every stone beneath it rested exactly where it belonged. A small lantern glowed near the entrance. Beside it sat an old rocking chair, and in that chair rested an elderly man with a thick gray beard and kind eyes. He wasn't reading. He wasn't working. He was simply watching the stars. The stranger approached quietly. The old man noticed him immediately, without surprise, without questions. He smiled. "I wondered when you'd arrive." The stranger laughed softly. Seems everyone here has been expecting me." The old man chuckled. "No." He looked toward the stars again. "We simply expect travelers." He gently motioned toward another rocking chair. "There is always room for one more." The stranger sat down. The chair rocked slowly beneath him, back and forth, back and forth. The movement was almost hypnotic. The old man listened to the wind for several moments before speaking. "Again, do you hear it?" The stranger listened carefully. The turning blades, the breeze through the grass, the distant call of a bird. "The wind?" he asked. The old man nodded. "Most people think the wind is making noise." He smiled gently. "But I think it's carrying quiet from one place to another." The stranger considered those words. He had never imagined silence could travel. Yet somehow, here, felt true. The old man pointed toward the valley below. From the hill, the entire village could be seen. Warm lights glowed from tiny cottages. The lake reflected the moon. The orchard shimmered softly beneath the stars. Smoke drifted lazily from a few chimneys. "It looks peaceful," the stranger whispered. The old man nodded. "It is." Then he added quietly, "But it wasn't always." The stranger looked at him. The old man's eyes remained fixed on the horizon. "Many years ago, this village worried about tomorrow just as much as everywhere else. People hurried. They argued. They forgot to notice the seasons. They forgot to notice each other." The windmill creaked gently as another breeze passed. One day, the old man continued. An elderly traveler arrived. He stayed only a single night. He never told anyone how to solve their problems. He only asked one question. The stranger leaned forward slightly. "What was the question?" The old man smiled. He asked, "If peace arrived at your front door tonight, would you be too busy to let it in?" The stranger lowered his eyes. He didn't answer, because somehow, the question wasn't meant only for the villagers. It was meant for him too. How many peaceful moments had passed by unnoticed? Many quiet evenings had he ignored? How many opportunities to simply rest had he traded for endless movement? The rocking chair continued its slow rhythm, back and forth, back and forth. The windmill blades turned above them. Steady, patient, unhurried. The old man close his eyes for a moment. "I've watched this windmill for 40 years. I've learned something from it." The stranger waited. "It never fights the wind. It simply moves with it." Another long silence settled between them. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't empty. It was peaceful, the kind of silence that gently wraps around tired hearts until they no longer feel the need to carry everything alone. Far below, the village lights glowed like tiny stars resting upon the earth. Above them, the real stars filled the endless sky, and somewhere between heaven and the earth, the stranger finally felt as though he belonged exactly where he was. The river that remembered every dream. The stranger remained beside the old windmill for a long while. The rocking chair moved gently beneath him. Back and forth, back and forth. There was something comforting about its rhythm. It reminded him that not every movement needed to take him somewhere new. Sometimes, moving gently in one place was enough. The old man eventually stood, lifting the small lantern from beside the door. Its warm glow painted soft circles of golden light across the wooden floor. "I should get some rest," he said quietly. "The wind knows its way through the night without me." The stranger smiled. "Thank you." The old man nodded kindly. "You'll find the river if you continue beyond the hill." He pointed toward a narrow path disappearing into the silver grass. "It has a way of helping people leave heavy thoughts behind." With those final words, the old man disappeared inside the windmill. The lantern light slowly faded behind the wooden door. Once again, the stranger found himself alone. But the loneliness he had carried for so many years no longer seemed interested in following him. He began walking. The hill sloped gently downward. Moonlight covered the fields like a soft blanket of silver. Wildflowers rested peacefully among the tall grass. Tiny drops of dew had already begun to form on the leaves. Every step released the fresh scent of earth beneath his boots. The air felt cool against his face. Comfortable, refreshing, the kind of coolness that quietly wakes the senses while calming the mind. Fireflies drifted lazily through the meadow. Some floated close to the ground. Others wandered higher, as though trying to reach the stars above. None of them hurried. Each tiny light blinked in its own quiet rhythm. The stranger watched them with gentle curiosity. They reminded him that even the smallest light could make darkness feel welcoming. The path continued until he began hearing something soft, very soft, almost too gentle to notice. Flowing water. He followed the sound. Soon the grass gave way to smooth stones. And there, hidden beneath old willow trees, a narrow river flowed peacefully through the valley. Its water moved slowly around polished rocks. Moonlight danced across its surface. The river didn't rush toward tomorrow. It simply continued its endless journey, one quiet moment at a time. A small wooden bridge crossed the river. Its handrails were smooth from many years of gentle use. The stranger stepped onto it. The wood gave a tiny creak beneath his weight, then became still again. He rested both hands on the railing. Below him, the water reflected the stars so clearly that it almost seemed as though the sky had chosen to flow across the earth. A cool breeze carried the scent of willow leaves. Some branches reached down, lightly touching the surface of the river. Each touch created tiny circles that slowly drifted outward before disappearing. The stranger watched those ripples. One circle became another, then another, until the water was calm once again. He smiled softly. Thoughts were much the same. They appeared, they expanded, then, if left alone, they quietly settled. He closed his eyes. The river continued its gentle song. Not loud enough to interrupt silence, only enough to become part of it. The sound wrapped gently around him. Wait. Are moving over smooth stones. Leaves whispering above. The distant call of a night bird. The quiet breathing of the wind. Everything belonged together. Nothing competed. Nothing demanded attention. For a long time, he simply listened. He noticed how different this night felt from ever. Why other night he could remember. Usually, darkness invited worry, questions, memories, plans. Tonight, darkness invited rest. The stranger slowly opened his eyes again. Across the river stood a single willow tree. Its branches swayed gently, almost like someone offering a peaceful greeting. He wondered how many travelers had stood on this bridge before him. How many had arrived carrying invisible burdens? How many had left carrying only quiet memories? Perhaps the river remembered every one of them. Perhaps that was why its voice sounded so gentle. It had listened to countless stories, and had learned that every heart eventually grows lighter when given enough time. The stranger took one long, slow breath, then another. The cool night air filled his lungs. When he exhaled, it felt as though a little more of yesterday quietly drifted away into the peaceful current below. He did not need to chase tomorrow. Tomorrow would arrive on its own. Tonight, the river asked nothing from him, except one simple thing. Stand still for just a little longer. And so he did. Above him, the stars continued their silent journey across the endless sky. Below him, the river carried moonlight gently through the sleeping valley. And between them, the stranger felt something he had not felt in many years. Home. The stranger remained on the little wooden bridge long after the river had become the only sound in the valley. He no longer counted the passing minutes. In fact, he wasn't sure whether minutes mattered here at all. The village seemed to live by something gentler than clocks. Something quieter than schedules. Perhaps it lived by the rising and setting of the sun, by the changing seasons, by the rhythm of peaceful hearts. He slowly left the bridge and continued along the riverbank. The grass was cool beneath his boots. Tiny drops of dew shimmered like scattered crystal. Beneath the moonlight, every few steps, a cricket sang softly from somewhere hidden among the tall grass. Its song never rushed. It repeated the same gentle melody, again and again, as though reminding the night that simple things were often the most beautiful. The stranger smiled. He remembered how, back in the busy places he had once called home, silence often felt uncomfortable. People filled every quiet moment with conversation, with noise, with endless distractions. But here, silence wasn't something to escape. It was something to treasure. The river curved gently around a cluster of smooth stones before disappearing into a field of wildflowers. Moonlight rested upon every petal. White daisies, tiny blue blossoms, soft purple lavender swaying gently with each passing breeze. The air carried their delicate fragrance across the valley. It wasn't strong, just enough to notice if you slowed down. And tonight, the stranger had finally learned how to slow down. A little farther ahead stood an enormous oak tree. Its branches stretched wide across the meadow, offering shelter to everything beneath them. At its roots rested a simple wood swing, old, weathered, strong. It moved gently in the breeze, even though no one sat upon it. The stranger walked toward it. He carefully lowered himself onto the swing. The ropes creaked softly, then settled into a slow rhythm. Forward, back, forward, back. The movement reminded him of the rocking chair beside the windmill. Gentle, predictable, comforting. He looked toward the horizon. Far beyond the hills, the darkness had begun to soften, not because morning had arrived, but because it was preparing to. The deepest part of night was slowly giving way to the first promise. Of dawn. Stars still filled the sky. Yet somewhere beyond them, morning waited patiently. There was no hurry. Morning never rushed the night away. It simply arrived when the time was right. The stranger found himself thinking about his own life. For years, he had believed that happiness was always waiting somewhere ahead, just beyond the next town, the next job, the next journey, the next achievement. He had searched endlessly, yet every destination eventually became another place to leave. Tonight, that feeling had changed. Perhaps peace wasn't hiding in some distant future. After all, perhaps it had always lived inside moments exactly like this one. A quiet swing beneath an ancient tree, a gentle river, a cool breeze, the scent of wildflowers, the soft glow of moonlight. Nothing extraordinary, yet somehow, everything he had been searching for. He closed his eyes. The swing continued its slow motion. Forward, back, forward, back. His breathing naturally matched the rhythm. Slow in, slow out, without trying, without effort. Above him, leaves whispered softly together. It sounded almost like distant voices sharing kind stories with the wind. The stranger imagined every leaf carrying a peaceful memory, every branch holding years of quiet evenings, every root remembering every traveler who once rested beneath its shade. He no longer felt like a visitor. The village had never asked him to become someone different. It had simply welcomed him exactly as he was. Tired, quiet, searching, and somehow, that had been enough. A robin sang one gentle note somewhere in distance. Then another. Morning birds were beginning to wake. Very slowly, very gently. The sky along the eastern horizon turned from deep blue to soft violet. The stars remained overhead, though their light grew fainter with every passing moment. The stranger opened his eyes. A peaceful smile rested upon his face. Not the smile of someone who had solved every problem, but the smile of someone who had finally stopped carrying them all at once. He stood from the swing. The meadow stretched quietly before him. The village still slept beneath the fading stars. Smoke had not yet begun rising from the chimneys. The bakery remained silent. The lake rested like polished glass. Everything waited peacefully for a new day. And for the first time in many years, the stranger was no longer afraid of tomorrow, because tonight had taught him something simple. Sometimes, the longest journey isn't the road beneath your feet. It's the distance between a restless heart and a peaceful one. He took one final look at the quiet valley, then slowly began walking back toward the sleeping village. Not as a stranger anymore, but as someone who had finally found a plaque where his heart knew how to rest. The first light of morning had not yet reached the rooftops. The world rested in that rare moment between night and dawn, a moment so quiet that it almost felt untouched by time. The stranger walked slowly back toward the village. The familiar stone path welcomed him once again. Each step felt lighter than the one before, not because the road had changed, but because something inside him had. The cottages remained peaceful. Small lanterns still glowed outside a few doors, their warm light growing softer as the sky slowly brightened. A gentle mist floated above the grass, wrapping the village in a blanket of pale silver. Everything looked as though it had been painted with calm. As he reached the center of the village, he noticed the little square where several wooden benches surrounded an ancient maple tree. The tree stood quietly, its branches stretching wide across the open space. Thousands of leaves rested overhead. Some still held tiny drops of dew that reflected the first hint of dawn. The stranger sat beneath the tree. He leaned back against its strong trunk and looked upward. The branches barrel. Why moved? Only the lightest breeze touched them. For a long while, he did nothing. He simply watched the sky slowly change. Deep blue became softer. Soft blue became pale gray. Then, almost without noticing, the horizon welcomed the first gentle colors of sunrise. There was no sudden burst of light, only a quiet beginning, just like every peaceful change in life. Slow, patient, certain. A nearby window opened softly. An elderly woman placed fresh flowers on her windowsill before quietly closing it again. Across the street, a baker unlocked his wooden door. The familiar scent of warm bread drifted into the cool morning air. A little farther away, someone swept a front porch with slow, steady movements. No one hurried, no one rushed to begin the day. It seemed the village believed that mornings deserved the same kindness as evenings. The stranger smiled. He finally understood. The peace he had felt throughout the night had never belonged only to the lake, or the orchard, or the windmill, or the river. It belonged to the people, to the way they lived, to the way they greeted each day with gratitude instead of urgency. He closed his eyes one last time. The cool morning breeze touched his face. Birds welcomed the sunrise with gentle songs. Somewhere nearby, a kettle began to whistle. The village was waking, but it woke quietly. The stranger placed a hand over his heart. Its rhythm was slower now, steadier, calmer. For years he had believed that rest was something waiting after success, after work, after achievement, after one more journey. Now he understood. Rest had always been available. It had simply been hidden beneath layers of worry. And tonight, those layers had quietly fallen away. He stood slowly. The sun finally peaked above the distant hills. Golden light spread across the rooftops. The lake shimmered. The orchard glowed. The windmill turned gentle. Why in the morning breeze? Everything seemed to smile without making a sound. The stranger picked up his small travel bag. It was no lighter than yesterday, yet somehow, it felt easier to carry. Because the heaviest burdens had never been inside the bag. They had been inside his heart. He looked once more at the village. No one came to stop him. No one asked him to stay. Because true peace never holds anyone tightly. It simply leaves the door open and welcomes them whenever they return. The stranger gave one quiet nod. Not as a goodbye, but as a promise to remember. This place whenever life became noisy again. Whenever worries grew too heavy. Whenever his heart forgot how to rest. He turned toward the road. Beyond the village, the same road he had walked the evening before. But it no longer felt like the same journey. Yesterday, he had arrived carrying exhaustion. Today, he left carrying peace. The morning sun continued to rise. The village slowly disappeared behind the gentle hills. Yet its quiet remained with him. In the rhythm of his breathing. In the softness of his steps. In the calm that now lived within his heart. And perhaps, somewhere beyond the next hill, another traveler was already walking toward the little village. Tired, searching, hoping for a place to rest, just as he once had. Because some places are never meant to be found on a map. They are found only when the heart is finally ready to slow down. So if you ever find yourself on a quiet road at the end of a long day, if the wind feels gentle, if the evening sky glows with soft shade, S of gold and blue. And if, in the distance, you notice a few warm lights waiting peacefully among the trees, perhaps you have found the village too. And if you do, there will always be a place waiting for you. No questions, no hurry, only kindness, only quiet, only rest.